Hello and welcome back to another update as we cover the latest developments throughout the front line in the Russo-Ukrainian war. We start out here in the direction of Novomykhailivka, where we have significant developments. First off, the Ukrainians launched a massive counterattack which managed to heavily pressure the Russian forces and deny most of the footholds they managed to gain. However, the Russians sent in reinforcements and were able to repel this counterattack and managed to still hold on to this foothold. This is why I, in the previous video, said that the Russians had solidified their foothold by launching this attack to the north, at the same time holding on to the positions here in the center. The reason for that is that the Russians were able to repel this Ukrainian counterattack because they had a large enough area to hold on to. Because of this, the Russians were able to slow down the Ukrainian counterattack in time for additional reinforcements to arrive, and with these additional reinforcements, they were able to hold on to their positions. Now the Russians will likely send even more soldiers to Novomykhailivka and start pushing again, especially right after a Ukrainian counterattack. The Ukrainian defenders in the area should be somewhat weaker. But we'll likely see more dynamic front line here in Novomykhailivka as the Ukrainians are holding on to the town very seriously. The Ukrainians have been spending a lot of time, ammunition, weaponry, and manpower on defending the town. This is why the town has been fought over for so long. Yet the Russians are also not giving in, and they are holding on to their positions within the town. And therefore, we're likely going to see additional attacks, additional display of Russian offensive operations here in the area to try and get control over the town. Moving on in the direction of Avdiivka, first off here to the south, there came out this very interesting video. It shows the Russian soldiers moving through this southern Avdiivka area. There are Russian soldiers on patrol. They're moving just along the roads without any care in the world, really, as we can see, moving through in their patrol. There are additional Russian soldiers, not just the one, and not just additional soldiers, there really is a lot moving through the area. We see at least 20 soldiers throughout this footage. We see them moving from the garage area to the east of the residential area, all the way to the intersection in the north, where we see that the Russians are just moving around freely, which shows that the Russians have full control over the area. They successfully repelled all of the Ukrainian counterattacks. In addition to that, they have with this control over the area, it shows that they are ready to build up further and restart offensive operations here in the south. This all happens because of the offensive in the north, which simply relieved all of the pressure from the residential area here and allowed the Russians to continue their operations of building up and defending the residential area to this point where they are now able to restart operations. So with this video, we'll likely see the Russians restarting operations in the south of Avdiivka. So we may see them launching attacks in the eastern or northern directions, as I mentioned in the previous video. In addition to that, there could be operations in the direction of the southwest, where the Russians have an interest in simply cutting off the Ukrainian forces here in the area. The section of the front line is very volatile as the Ukrainians attempt to regain some lost positions, especially here by the military base, but also throughout the southern front. The Russians are in turn trying to solidify the control, consolidate their gains, and move in different directions, trying to gain further control over the areas and solidify their hold on the south of Avdiivka. At the same time, we also see a lot of offensive operations in the north. The Russians are starting to move towards the heights here to the east of Avdiivka, try to capture it after the Ukrainians withdrew from it. In the central parts of the city, the Russians are launching further offensive operations, capturing a few more areas within the residential area as they move towards the main train station in the center. We also see additional advancements by the Russians here to the northwest in the direction of the coal plant. This is across the bridge, and they are advancing and gaining further control over the Dacha area. There's been no full confirmed takeover of the Dacha area, but it is getting closer and closer as Russians are moving through to this station area with additional garages here in the western parts of Avdiivka, which would allow them to gain full fire control over the main supply route, or possibly even cutting it off completely, physically. In addition to that, we have this geolocated footage coming from the north of Avdiivka, confirming some of these advancements over the past few days. This is why it's important to know and find reliable sources, because they give additional information before it arrives with geolocated footage. Footage is always delayed. This is why we're only getting it now, while multiple further advancements have taken place. But this also shows the reliability of these sources because they reported on these advancements prior to evidence coming out about them. So this is why I use them, and this is why you come to me to get the first updates most reliably. We then move further north in the direction of Bakhmut, where there have been reports by the Russian 98th Airborne Division that offensive operations have started throughout the Bakhmut front. This fighting that is taking place throughout the Bakhmut front is one that is taking advantage of the weather changes. The weather around Bakhmut, Kreminna, and Kupiansk today has been heavy snowfall. So there is very little ability for drones to fly around, and therefore little accuracy for artillery, and therefore Russian infantry soldiers who are parts of the airborne division are able to launch offensive operations without any air cover themselves, but also without the Ukrainians detecting them. So we're likely going to see a lot of offensive operations by the Russians throughout the front line in the Bakhmut direction, where they try to gain better positions here at the areas where they are close to the front. This would be in the direction of Klishivka, where the Russians have an interest in gaining full control over the fortifications to the west of Klishivka. Could be further advancements in the forest patch area and the forest lines to the north of Klishivka. Could also be advancements here in the south or east of Klishivka, in the forest lines by the railways, by Rifka and so on. All of these to gain and improve positions here by the west of Bakhmut. Could also be here in the direction of Bakhmut, whether it is by the cemetery area, the central railway and forest line area, or Bakhmut itself. There is also additional information of fighting taking place in the direction of Rifka. So all throughout the front line, there are offensive operations taking place where especially the Russians are focusing their forces, and how heavy it is, we do not know. But it is reported that it is the 98th Airborne Division, which is the same one that conducted the operations in the direction of Kiev at the start of the invasion. And they're also the soldiers who were defending against the Ukrainian summer offensive. So they have the most experience in both offensive and defensive operations. And therefore, there is a lot to kind of expect from them in the sense that they are very capable compared to other units with less experience. Moving further north in the direction of Belorivka, we see that the Russians have made this small advancement, which was confirmed with this geolocated footage. Sometimes it's the geolocated footage that comes first for most accurate advancements. And with this, we see that the Russians are conducting and increasing their offensive operations in this direction to gain further advancements and capturing further positions here in the direction of Belorivka. So we're seeing that there are continuous fighting here in the direction of Belorivka, where the Russians are trying to improve their positions and getting closer and closer to the village. Moving further north, we see that there are reports of fighting, but mostly just positional here in the northern parts, all the way from Kreminna to Kupiansk, with nothing serious. The most serious developments is the ones here by Bakhmut and Novomykhailivka, where heavy fighting is taking place, where the Ukrainians are launching a counterattack in the town of Novomykhailivka, and the Russians are launching a new offensive in the direction of Bakhmut. At the same time, fighting in Avdiivka is somewhat slower now because of how heavy the fighting is taking place. Additional Ukrainian reinforcements are entering the city, while the Russians are trying to continue their positional fighting and cut off the supply line, which would force all of the Ukrainians to move through this dirt road here to the north of the citadel area, which would significantly slow down and limit the Ukrainian capability to send additional reinforcements and supplies to the city, while always being under direct fire by Russian soldiers here to the southeast of Sheverne. Well, that is pretty much all of the advancements here in the 9th of February, and that is going to be all for this update. Thank you all for watching and have a great day.